G'day guys and welcome to ReDriven. Now look, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, hang on a sec, isn't ReDriven about buying advice on realistic used cars? Like, how the hell is a bespoke built 800 horsepower Evo 9 any kind of representation of a realistic used car? Well, you've got a point there. Hence why we also have this Evo 7. This Evo 7, when the owner bought it a couple of years ago, was one of the least expensive Evos in all of Australia. It's done nearly 200,000 kilometres and it has had one hell of a life. So we feel that the vast majority of Evos that are for sale at the moment will sit somewhere between these two cars. Now, it's obviously no secret that the Evo is one of the most revered and celebrated performance cars of all time, and they have an incredibly loyal fan base. But the thing is, now that they're a few years old, are they actually any good? What goes wrong with them? What do they cost to own and maintain? What do they like to live with on a daily basis? And most importantly, should you buy one? Let's find out. Now guys, before we get deep into the Evo, I've got to admit something. I'm genuinely really nervous about this video because I love the Mitsubishi Evolution. Massive fan of these things. But I also know they have an incredibly loyal fan base and we don't really want to offend or upset anyone. So to make this video as transparent and as objective as we possibly could, we've reached out to multiple Evo owners groups, stacks of Evo owners, Evo specialist mechanics and technicians. We've trawled through hours worth of forums and blog posts. So this video is basically the culmination of all of that information. Now I should also mention as well, in this video we're going to be focusing on Evo 7, 8s and 9s that are basically here in Australia. If you're not here in Australia, that's a massive shame, but look, if you're not from Australia or not here in Australia, don't freak out or panic because everything we're going to be going over should relate to Evo 7, 8s and 9s in your local market. Now, unless you've been living under a rock or you've just awoken from a very deep and dark coma, you probably know that the Lancer Evolution initially started life out as a Japanese market only all-wheel drive turbocharged rally/road weapon of a car. And it's evolved through different generations, getting through the 7, 8 and 9. There's also the Evo 10, but it was discontinued. But in this video, again, 7, 8 and 9. Now the differences between the 7s through to the 9 are extensive, hence why we're now going to cut to a montage with me doing a voiceover. The Evo 7, 8 and 9 are all built on Mitsubishi's CT9A platform, obviously excluding the impossibly cool Evo 9 wagon, which is a CT9W. With all models equipped with the now iconic 4G63 2-litre turbocharged engine. Although, while the 4G63 is consistent in name and overall design, it has also evolved throughout the 7, 8 and 9 lifespan. All Evos send their copious amounts of power to the ground via all four wheels, generally with the assistance of Mitsubishi's active centre differential and active yaw control, with specific variants receiving a limited slip diff. Transmission-wise, you're going to be looking at either a 5 or 6-speed manual gearbox, again depending on the variant, and a far less popular 5-speed automatic has also been available. But you don't want the automatic. In terms of the different variants across these generations of Evo, there have been what feels like hundreds, from the RS to the GSR to MR, not to mention the plethora of special editions that will all vary depending on where you're watching this from, and not to mention again the fact that the Evo has been the darling of the tuning and modification world. So what each Evo example features in terms of equipment will vary from car to car. Now guys, we'd love to go over every little detail of every variant of each Evolution, but that would take probably days, to be honest, but we have gathered all that information. We put it in our very handy ReDriven cheat sheets. Our cheat sheets are invaluable as they provide a full breakdown of the car's model range, its common problems, what you need to look out for before handing over your hard-earned cash, how much of that cash you should be handing over, and so much more. Check it out at redriven.com or in the link below. Now guys, if you already own an Evo or you're a bit of an Evo expert and you've noticed that we've missed something major in this video, please let us know in the comments. Like, we're obviously going to do our best to cover as much as we can in this video, but we generally find it's those that own these cars that are the true experts. So yeah, if we've missed something, let us know. So, do they look good? Look, I shouldn't comment on this because I personally love the Evo, so I'm way too biased to give an opinion on that. Specifically, I adore the wagon. I do very bad things to own a wagon version of these. But we want to know what you guys think. Do you like the look of the Evo? Let us know in the comments. Although I should mention, a lot of people ruin these with cheap body kits and cheap dodgy wheels. I know everyone's entitled to their own opinion of what they put on their Evo, but it's heartbreaking seeing these with cheap and dodgy body kits and wheels. Now guys, there are some common faults and problems that do occur with the exteriors of all Evos, and we'll get to that in a little bit, but if you are in the market for buying one of these, there are some things you do need to check out. Now guys, these are a serious performance car with a copious amount of grip. But the thing is, physics are real and that grip does run out. The problem is, when it runs out, you're normally going extremely quickly and you're going to end up in someone's front yard or deep in the scenery somewhere. So if you're looking at buying one of these, it is critical that you look for accident damage. Okay, first up, go over the entire car and look at all the panel gaps. Do the panel gaps all match? Like, look, obviously these cars are getting a bit older and a few, scuffs and, trolley and car park and life blemishes are to be expected. But if the panel gaps are all over the shop, Next up, look at the paint. Does it match in color and texture all over the entire car? Again, these cars are aging, so the paint can kind of get a bit, old and crusty. But if the paint doesn't match in color or texture, chances are it's been resprayed, and that might be because it's hit something hard. Okay, next up, make sure you pop the bonnet and look at this front cross member. Is there any damage on that, and has it been painted badly? Actually, speaking of paint, look for any signs of overspray. If you see overspray in the engine bay, there's a good chance the thing's had an accident, and even worse, dodgy repair work. Also, while you're under here, just have a look around the entire engine bay for like any leaks or fluids or anything that doesn't seem attached properly or anything that, again, looks a bit dodgy. We'll get into the more mechanical stuff a little bit later, but make sure you check this out. Okay, next up, look at the condition of the wheels and tires. Like, a little bit of light gutter rash is okay. These cars are getting on in age a little bit, but any really big impacts, not good. Next up, the tires. What kind of tires are they? Do they all match, and what condition are they in? If the tires don't match, the tire is the one part of the car that touches the road. If the owner's willing to cheap out on dodgy tires, where else are they cutting corners? Then look at the condition of the tires and how they're wearing. If they're wearing really unevenly, it might mean that the car needs a wheel alignment. Even worst case scenario, it might have some suspension damage, and that's not good at all. If it's worn really heavily on the outside of the tire, it means it's been cornered really hard. Look, again, these are a performance car. They are designed to be driven pretty hard, but they also get abused. So yeah, good telltale sign that it might have been overdriven. Now guys, if the car is fitted with a body kit like this one, is it a really high quality body kit, and has it been installed correctly? As I mentioned before, people put some cheap dodgy body kits on these, and it's a pretty good sign that, again, they're cutting corners if they're not spending quality money. This is one hell of a body kit, and it is installed perfectly. Okay, finally with the exterior, try to get underneath the car. This is best done if you're getting you should get a pre-purchase inspection done. Yes, it's going to be a couple of $100, but it could save you tens of thousands of dollars. But get underneath there and look at, again, for any oil leaks, any fluids, even any fresh paint, because fresh paint might be a sign that they're trying to cover up some damage. So yeah, get underneath the car. Get a pre-purchase inspection done. Critical. So how's the interior? Well, look, the Evo, as we all know, is based on the budget-friendly Lancer, or Sedia, depending on where you're watching this from. And yeah, you can tell. Mitsubishi have tried to obviously tart it up a little bit with a Momo steering wheel and these fabulous Recaro seats. And depending on the model, some have some carbon fiber trim and some Alcantara. But like, the Evo is never really about, the luxuries inside. But again, you can tell. But in saying that, the seating position is absolutely perfect. All the ergonomics are great. Yeah, it feels cheap, but it also feels right. Now, as far as wear and tear goes, we're obviously going to start in the Evo 7, not the other fancy schmancy one. And yeah, there's a fair bit of wear and tear in here. Like the steering wheel, the Alcantara around that is wearing pretty badly. All the plastics here, there's a little bit of squidge, but they're all pretty marked up. Alcantara here is all kind of wearing away. Plastic door handles looking a bit shabby. Yeah, everything is feeling like, look, this thing has had a hard life. It's nearly 200,000 Ks. It feels nearly 200,000 Ks. Now guys, it is really common for the bolsters in the seats, especially on the driver entry side, to get pretty heavily worn. This one is really heavily worn. Also, depending on what fabric has been used, depending on which Evolution and which variant, some of the fabrics can fade really badly due to UV light. So yeah, if it's faded, that does happen. Even like the handbrake is really worn. The boot here that's definitely seen better days. Everything feels very used, but weirdly at the same time, it all feels pretty solid. Like all the switchgear feels really solid. Yeah, it's used, but solid. Now the interior of this Evo 9 is vastly different to the 7. Look, in overall design, it's pretty much exactly the same, but this thing's been retrimmed in Alcantara everywhere. There's carbon fiber inlays. The infotainment system sits flush with the dash. There's carbon fiber up here. There's no gear stick here because this car has a sequential gearbox. We'll get to that a little bit later. The condition of everything is absolutely immaculate. It feels like a new car in here. Very, very special place to be. Now in the back seat, I'm exactly 15 centimeters taller than rally legend Tommy Mäkinen. This is in my driving position, and the space is awesome. Heaps of footroom, loads of knee room. It feels nice and airy and spacious in here. Excellent space in the back. As far as wear and tear goes, pretty good. Like, this car obviously gets used all the time. There's a few little scuffs and scratches on the back of the Recaros, bit of wear and tear on the doors and the seat, but overall, considering it's nearly 200,000 Ks, good for wear and tear in the back. So how's the tech? Well, even in the later model Evo 9s, the tech really wasn't that extensive. But to give you a quick overview of what these things have, here's me doing a voiceover. Depending on year and trim level, it's safe to expect a CD player with AM and FM radio, a 6-speaker stereo, central locking, air conditioning, and maybe even power windows. Forget Bluetooth connectivity, Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, or any of that sort of mobile phone connectivity. But as you can see with these two cars, there are loads of aftermarket options available to improve the levels of tech. For all the graphic details of which Evo gets what tech, just jump on ReDriven.com and check out the cheat sheet. So, is it practical? Oh my God. Well, it would be more practical if it didn't have this whacking great big subwoofer in the boot, but in general, pretty good practicality. Practicality in the back seat, not a whole lot. There are, a couple of cup holders just here. There's an ashtray here, if you're a smoker. Disgusting. And there's a spot for your deep dark secrets just up here. And practicality up front. So you've got some okay sized door bins. There's a spot for fingernails and bits of flesh up here. There's a spot for, I suppose, like half a muffin hiding down there. There's normally storage under here, but the owner of this has put a boost gauge, so no more storage there. Pretty decent sized glove box. A couple of cup holders there and a little storage bin in here. And I think that's it. Nothing else, no sunglasses. No, that's about it. Okay, what goes wrong with these things? Look, we're gonna get to the mechanical stuff in a second, but first up, let's start with the exterior. Okay, first up, I hate to say it, rust. As these things are getting older, they're getting more and more susceptible to rust damage, so make sure you get it up on a hoist. Look everywhere for this evil stuff, but guys, specifically along the chassis rails, around the front crossmember, around the rear subframe, and the tops of the strut housings. Basically look everywhere, and if you find rust, we'd be walking away. Now guys, if you find one of these things with a sunroof, does the sunroof actually work? Is it leaking? Is there any rust around it? Is it as rattly as a can of spray paint? We avoid the sunroof models. They're cool, but yeah, too many problems. And finally, on the exterior, has it been resprayed? Loads of these are getting resprayed because the paint can get a little bit sketchy, but if it has been resprayed, has it been done properly? It's really expensive to do a respray properly, and many people cut corners and that won't last. So has it been done right? Okay, now problems with the interior. The first one is a bit scary. Because these are generally speaking imports, they can have a bit of a mysterious history. And the problem is a lot of previous owners swap out the instrument cluster for a different instrument cluster that shows less kilometers on the odometer. Now, it's going to depend on where you're watching this from on how you're going to ascertain if the kilometers showing are the correct ones as far as like registration records and stuff like that goes. But a really good telltale sign is if it says 70,000 Ks, but the steering wheel, the gear knob, the pedals, and the carpet's all really heavily worn, there's a chance it's done far more than 70,000 Ks. Next up, again like the exterior, if there are any modifications inside, make sure they all work properly. You'd be amazed how many people buy cars like this, and there's a plethora of modifications, and then they only find out that half of them don't work after they've bought the car. So if you're test driving one or you're looking at one, make sure everything that's fitted actually works. Okay, next up, make sure that the active center diff control and lights actually work on the car. This one, it's had an interesting history, so only the tarmac light works. But yeah, if you're looking at one of these, make sure you turn it into accessories, start the car, and flick through your ACD button and make sure that all the tarmac, gravel, and snow settings actually work. Now, check that the actual Recaros, the design and the fabric actually matches the car you're looking at, because what can happen, number one, these get stolen pretty regularly, so owners have to put in aftermarket Recaros. Also, some owners take these Recaros out, sell them, and put like a single piece racing bucket in it. So again, make sure that the seats actually match the car. Now guys, before we get into mechanically what goes wrong with these, if you're enjoying this video, can I ask a favor? Can you hit those like, subscribe, and bell buttons? And also, can you share this video as much as you can? Because the more you share this, the more you hit those buttons, the more of these videos we can make. And hopefully that's a good thing. Okay, mechanically what goes wrong with them? Well, the thing is, I'm not a mechanic, so I'm not qualified to tell you. But Jim is.
What goes wrong with these things? Everything. Turbos, head gaskets, catastrophic engine and transmission failures when they're heavily modified. So if you're looking at one that's been modified, then all bets are off in terms of what goes wrong with it, especially if the mods have been done by a dickhead. And speaking of dickheads, the previous owner might be the biggest problem you'll have with one of these cars. These things are a really well-built performance car and don't have too many inherent reliability issues. There are a few reliability issues with the 6-speed transmission, and poorly serviced engines can have problems with the balance shaft bearings and some of the valve train components. They do have a tendency to wear out cam position sensors. It's been recommended that you should always have a spare one of those, but overall, they're pretty good. If you are looking at one now, check the timing belt history and check everything else that degrades over time. Check the coolant and brake fluid and have a good look at all the vacuum lines. Check all the boost control solenoid lines and basically anything that's rubber, just have a good look at it. Keep in mind, these are a high performance car and it's likely to have been thrashed at some point. And no matter how well something's designed or built, things are going to wear and quite often break. If you don't know exactly what you're looking for, get someone with Evo experience to check it out. And for all the other details, check out the cheat sheets.
So is it safe? Well, not really. Look, it's safe in terms of the fact that these are designed to have a copious amount of grip through corners and they hold onto the road like their life depends on it. But what have you got when that grip runs out? What safety features have you got? Well, here's me doing a voiceover as fast as I possibly can. Safety equipment includes front airbags, seatbelts, doors, and technically a 3-star safety rating from way back in 2003. Yeah, let's be honest, it's not all that safe, but for the details of which Evo gets what safety tech, check out the cheat sheets on ReDriven.com. Now, before we get into what these things are like to drive, if you are in the market for one of these and you're going to test drive one, when you go to look at a car, make sure that the car hasn't been started and warmed up, because you want to see what it's like when it starts cold. Get the owner to start the car and stand at the back and look at the exhaust pipe. If any smoke comes out, especially if it's dark grey or blue, that means bad oil things. Oh, also listen for any rattles or dodgy mechanical sounds before you take off on the drive. So what are these like to drive? Well, let's start with the not 800 horsepower one first. Now the thing is, what hasn't been said about the Evo in terms of driving characteristics and performance? There are literally thousands of videos on YouTube and online in general talking about what these things are like to drive at the limit and how they're just phenomenal performance cars. So instead of just repeating all that, because that'd be boring, let's talk about what you need to be on the watch for when you're test driving one. First up, when you do floor it, does the power come on smoothly and cleanly? It should be relatively linear. Some cars are going to have a bit of turbo lag, but that thrust moving you forward should be pretty relentless. Also, when you do that, listen for, again, any weird mechanical sounds or sounds that shouldn't be there. It could be hard to hear it over the aftermarket exhaust. Chances are all Evos are going to have an aftermarket exhaust, but yeah, if there's anything metallic sounding or overly rattly or squealing, not good. Also, select a higher gear and accelerate, put your foot into the floor and listen for any clutch slip at all, because replacing a clutch in these things can add up very quickly. Next up, select each gear and come on and off the throttle a fair bit just to see if it jumps out of gear. If it jumps out of gear, not a good thing. Also, when you're changing through the gears, feel for any crunching or grinding, because it could be a good sign that the synchros are on their way out. Also, get on the freeway or an expressway, get it in 5th gear and listen for any gearbox whine. Okay, next up, you've got to check the brakes out. Get up to about 60k an hour and give the brakes a decent go. Don't do a full ABS lock up, but a decent hit on that middle pedal, and see if the car pulls to one side or the other, or if there's any kind of violent vibrations. Again, it should be accelerating. It should slow down smoothly and accurately. Now guys, as we mentioned, the vast majority of Evos are going to have a modification or 12 fitted to them, and I know we keep repeating it, but it's just so critical that those modifications are done properly and they're done with high quality items. If they're done badly or installed on a super tight budget, it's just a recipe for disasters down the track. Okay, also find some really rough roads or a car park with speed humps like this, and when you go over the speed humps, just listen for any clunking or grinding or mechanical sounds coming from the suspension. It should be silent. Also, when you're in the car park, get the car on full lock. You'll soon realize how bad the turning circle in these things are. But again, listen for any mechanical or bad sounds. Could be a diff, could be a CV joint. This one's silent. Many aren't. Okay, now speaking of those modifications, I was going to go through every detail of this thing, but just know if you can modify it on an Evo, this has been modified. It has a full built engine, it has a sequential gearbox, every nut and bolt has been seen to. It has to be one of the most thoroughly modified Evos, short of a time attack car. This thing's bonkers. But what's it like to drive? Honestly, it's a bit terrifying. I'm genuinely questioning my manhood driving this. I don't know if you can even hear me over the gearbox whine and all the noises and cacophony of sounds going on in here. Amazing. Now guys, as much as it would be awesome to give this thing the full beans, it's off the cards. We're on public roads. I need my license for this job. And this thing won't only lose my license, but it'll probably send me to jail. It is that fast. The owner took me for a drive yesterday at full beans, and I struggled to find words. It's like horizontal skydiving, but way more aggressive than skydiving. I couldn't focus. I couldn't, my brain and eyes couldn't keep up with the amount of information being violently penetrated into my brain. It was crazy. But so you're not disappointed, here's some footage of what this thing can really do. Look, I've been lucky enough in this job to drive, GT2 RS, various McLarens, even like a Lamborghini Aventador SV. This thing is on a whole different planet to that, whole different league. They're fast, this is offensive. But the thing is, even though this completely defies the laws of physics, you can't daily it, but it is manageable and usable around town. Like I've had it for a couple of days, I picked up some groceries, I've been to a drive-through, got fuel in it. It's actually kind of livable to a degree. The suspension's fantastic. This has got the full white line catalogue of suspension components, and the ride quality is great. And it's got all the typical Evo, great steering nuance, all that sort of stuff. And go from there. And it's got all the typical Evo stuff, amazing steering nuance, all that sort of stuff. It's just so fast. Guys, seriously, what a car. It's way too fast for public roads. And I'd be happy if I never drive this thing ever again, because it is genuinely terrifying. But honestly, what a car. Insane. Pricing here in Australia kicks off from around about $25,000 for, say, an automatic Evo 7 GTA with loads of kilometres in questionable condition, and it tops out at around about $90,000 for, say, a mint condition low kilometre Evo 8 MR or a locally delivered Evo 9. Something like this Evo 7, you're going to be looking at around about 35 grandish. For the Evo 9, God knows, no idea. A fortune, $1 million, I don't know, heaps. Evos, like all Japanese performance cars of the 90s and 2000s, are appreciating in price. So if you find the right Evo, and we can't say there's a guarantee on this obviously, but if you find the right Evo, there's a bloody good chance that it's going to be a hell of an investment. And for pricing elsewhere on this big planet of ours, here's a graphic. Now in terms of fuel consumption, which is hilarious if you're looking at an Evo, because I don't think any Evo owner has ever been concerned with fuel consumption, Mitsubishi claim a figure of anywhere from 10.5 to 11 litres per 100 Ks, which you might get if you've got SAS levels of self-discipline, but realistically you're never going to see those consumption figures. Locally delivered Evos came with a 5-year 130,000 kilometre warranty, but that means that all Evos are well and truly out of warranty now. Servicing is recommended at every 12 months or 15,000 Ks. However, if you're driving these things in the manner of which they're designed to be driven, we'd be servicing it far more regularly than that. Also, if you are in the market to buy one of these or you already own one, make sure you join an owners group. We reached out to a bunch of owners groups when researching this video, and they were phenomenal. The amount of support and information they can give is just incredible. So yeah, if you're buying one, join an owners group. Okay, so should you buy one? Well, yes and no. Well, look, it's a yes in terms of the fact that these generations of Evo still provide a brilliant driving experience, both when standard or when modified properly. And with pricing ever increasing, there's some potential that you might actually be buying something of an investment as well as being an iconic driver's car that also offers really good practicality and, if it's cared for, great reliability. Okay, it's a very big no if the Evo you're looking at has been abused or heavily mistreated in really any way. You're far better off spending more money on the most original, mint condition, low kilometre Evo with minimal modifications and a full and thorough service history than an Evo with a questionable history, as the money that you're going to save in actually buying the car will soon be eaten up in repairing and maintaining a rough example. I feel like Evos have almost become almost like vintage Ferraris. The cost of buying them and maintaining them is ever increasing, but they come with real pedigree, and the right one will provide a truly wonderful driving and ownership experience. But the wrong one will drain your bank account faster than this thing drained all the blood from my extremities. Now guys, I have to give a massive shout out to Jeremy for lending us his Evo 7 and to Alex from Auto Access for lending us his insane Evo 9. Also the guys from Precision Racing for basically harnessing the power of the sun and building the engine in this thing, and also Benchmark Solutions for calibrating the engine and gearbox. All of their links are in the description. Now guys, what did you think of the Evos? Let us know in the comments, and remember, can you hit those like, subscribe and bell icon buttons, and please share this video as much as you can, because the more you share this, the more of these videos we can make, and hopefully that's a good thing. Also, after the video, go and check us out on the socials. See you next time. Now guys, if you're an Evo expert or you own an Evo and you've noticed that in this video we've missed something major that needs to be, you need to, what is going on today? Right, cool, here we go. Now guys, if you're a bit of an Evo expert. Now guys, if you already own an Evo or you're a bit of an come on Morris. Okay, first up, it's rust. As these things are getting older, they're getting more and more susceptible. Here we go. Now I should also mention that we're going to be focusing in this video. Here we go. Now guys, we'd love to go over, every single detail and every precise. Okay, it's a very, very big no if the Evo,